everyone, welcome to my channel. So my name is Paulo, and today we're going to be focusing on how to self-study while working and essentially how to get from 0 to certified. Okay, so this is actually coming on the back of my own experience. So I've been a bit absent, let's say, within the last couple of weeks or so, busy myself study for a certification while also taking care of a few webinars, and that essentially is like eating me all my time. Okay, so on the back of that, of course, being myself a consultant, working as an associate director at a tech consulting company, managing a bigger team, and also on the back of that, also doing a few knowledge sharing, support people as much as I can. Of course, for me, time is of the essence. Okay, taking that into consideration, aside of that, of course, when you are looking to focus yourself on actually going for a certification or for a course or whatever that may be, efficiency is important, but also outside of that, also your own motivation, I would say. But also it's like, how is it that you can actually be successful? No, so all of that, that's what I'm going to be focusing today. Okay, and for that I'll be like sharing with you a few tips. Okay, so starting on what are the study techniques that you actually should avoid, since they actually don't work, and I'm going to be sharing some scientific evidences or concrete proofs, let's say, of that. Okay, so outside of that as well, so I'm going to be sharing with you how is it that you can actually leverage your talents, okay, in order to actually to get the results and get yourself across the board and actually close with a success. And last but not least, I'm going to be sharing my own framework, okay, of how is it that I actually study and how is it that I manage outside of my normal life while working, doing everything that I do. I also have time, let's say, to actually to take a few certifications. Okay, and this is actually based on the fact that I failed a couple of certifications, and then on the back of that, I needed to take a deep breath and then understand how is it that I could actually come up with a framework that would allow me to pass. And then since then, I took 6 more without failing. Okay, so with that said, stick around if you want to know more. Okay, let's then address the first point, okay, that is the study techniques that actually don't work, okay. All of us already went through, I would say, several different techniques of study while at university, before that, and then after university, when you do your graduation, you go for your post-graduation, your master, whatever that may be, where you tried different approaches. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about a few, like 3 actually that don't work. Okay, so and the reason for this is important so that you can actually understand what is it that you should avoid. Okay, so on this concrete example, I'm talking about a specific certification that I took within Salesforce. Okay, so CRM, but I would say that this is essentially applies to everyone. Okay, so specifically, what are the techniques then you should be avoiding? So one is color coding. Okay, so I do recall when I was at university and studying, and then after that as well, that I saw a few colleagues of mine that they were actually quite focused on color coding, trying to make sure that they would be able to focus on, let's say, the most important, topics that they should focus on. Okay, for the exam. Then myself, I never use that, but I will drop it on the comments below a few studies that actually, from a scientific perspective, actually showcase that actually doesn't work. So the other thing that, for instance, it's normal that people normally do, it's like summarizing. Okay, so I tried that several times. Okay, so essentially you go and you go into a class or whatever that may be, you are there, you at the end you try to summarize as much as possible what you got out of that lesson, or then afterwards actually when you are studying. So guess what, it doesn't work as well. Okay, so, or at least is less efficient then. Okay, so take that into consideration. Then the other point that normally people tend to do, but actually doesn't work as well, unfortunately, it's like rereading. Okay, so essentially you read it and you read it and you read it, you try to memorize it. Okay, it will work for some people, but not for the big part of us. Okay, so with that said, and now that you know the ones that don't work, I will then explain to you what are the ones that you should be actually looking at and what is it that you should be focusing on. Okay, so to start from, let's focus on how is it that you can actually leverage your talents. Okay, so stick around if you want to know more. Okay, let's go into this one. So this is all about using your talents to self-study. Okay, why is this important? So I'm going to give you an example. So although I'm going to be sharing my framework, okay, the one that I use to actually to be successful and be able to actually finish my course, get more certifications, etc. This it all depends a bit on you. It all depends on your talents. Okay, so it's important for you to actually to use this framework as a kind of a guidance, but nevertheless actually take a look into yourself and try to understand how is it that you can actually make it work for you. Okay, so I will give you then my take on this. So all of us, we have our own talents. Okay, so it's important for you to understand what are your key talents, and I'm going to give you some examples. So a few years ago, like a few decades ago, it was all about mathematics. If you are not smart in math, then you would essentially suck. Okay, that was it. Okay, so fast forward a few years, people understood that you have more than just one type of intelligence, let's put it like that. So you have several different types of intelligence. I think around 8 or 10 different types of intelligence. Actually, please feel free to comment on that on the comments below. Drop that on the comments below. But I think it's around that. So nevertheless, I'm just going to give you a few examples. So let's start with the first one. Okay, so imagine that you are really good with linguistics. Okay, so you are word smart. Okay, try to put yourself into a kind of a study framework that allows for you to actually to leverage that superpower that you have, your talent. Okay, so I would say that that is, for instance, one of the things that I have that is strongest on me. Okay, it's exactly that part around the communication part. Okay, so you need to leverage that. Okay, so the other point that is also important is, for instance, as an example, if you are actually strong on mathematics, rationale, and etc., try to build up a process that would work for you, that you use numericals approach, reasoning, etc., to make it work. Okay, so another example could be like, for instance, imagine that you are very strong in terms of spatial intelligence. Okay, so you are able actually to connect the dots. Okay, so this is actually quite important for those that actually work on architecture, may that be system architecture or actually civil architecture. Okay, it's important for them to actually to be able to connect the dots. So here is the same, like for instance, on my case specifically, that is one of the points that I feel that I have a stronger, let's say, inclination. So for me, it's important before actually I jump into the study part that I actually understand how is it that things connect. Okay, and therefore after that it will be easier for me to understand what is it that I need to do and how is it that I need to make sure that I'm actually successful while studying. Okay, then another example would be you have people that are actually, I would say, people smart. Okay, they are very strong in terms of interpersonal intelligence. Okay, so for those could be like, for instance, you study and then you prepare a presentation. Okay, and you try to explain to others what is it that you understood around what is it that you are studying about. Okay, so that could be another way of you actually leveraging your intelligence. Then the other one could be like, for instance, for those that are more shy or more into themselves, could be like, for instance, you try to explain to yourself how is it that you break out something in terms of deconstruct something in terms of the logic that you need to study and try to explain to yourself. Okay, so this is all about interpersonal intelligence. But you have more, like for instance, you have musical intelligence as well. Like for instance, although I'm not sure that I have a musical intelligence, what I do know is that I use music all the time to get my focus. Okay, so when I'm working, when I'm studying, etc., I need to have music so that I can actually focus. Okay, so that is important for me as well. The other point will be like, for instance, on the flip side, you have people that are much more into nature. Okay, so instead of you forcing yourself to be in a place that you cannot focus, go into the wild between brackets, and most likely it will work for you. Okay, because you're going to be much more stronger in terms of what is it that you do. For instance, the other point could be for those that have a more of a physical intelligence, more kinetic intelligence, could be that you're going to put your headsets and you go out for a run. Okay, most likely could work for you as well. So all of that are just examples of different ways that you could actually leverage your talents. Okay, so on the back of this, then I'm going to be sharing my own framework, so that I'm going to go step by step, and I'm going to be explaining you with a concrete example, in this case, a certification that I took, so that you can have as much as possible, let's say, a tool that you can be using that for the future. Okay, so stick around if you want to know more. Okay, let's go into this. So I'm going to be sharing with you then what is my personal framework. Okay, so essentially I have four main steps, okay, and one golden rule. Okay, so starting with the golden rule. So my golden rule is, and before that actually, so normally speaking, I apply my personal framework for roughly 3 weeks in average, okay, while I'm studying. And then outside of that as well, and looking to the golden rule, is that I never go into an exam where I don't feel that I can actually reach, let's say, 80%. Okay, so normally speaking, that's how I set myself, let's say. And the reason for this is quite simple, my friends. I failed twice and it was painful. Okay, so with that said, then I learned my lesson, and then I thought to myself, how is it that I can actually make it work? Okay, so that was for me, let's say, the breaking point. So let's say the golden rule. Starting with concrete examples. So step number one, what is it that I do? So firstly, and this in connection to one of my talents, as I mentioned before, always try to think, what is it that I'm best at, and try to marry that with the way you should be studying. Okay, so on my specific case, what I do as a first step is I'm gonna go and try to have a high level understanding of what is it that I need to study. Okay, so in this case, you can be using, and specifically as an example, so I was taking a Salesforce certification, on this case Marketing Cloud. So I focus essentially on getting webinars or trailheads or even classes. Okay, so that will be my advice. Okay, so that you have an understanding of how is it that things actually work. Okay, so specifically on this case, I took webinars, okay, and I've done a few trailheads as well, so that it's a gamification platform for those that don't know it, that allow for you to actually to have a better understanding of whatever would be the topic, on this case related to Salesforce. So I went into that. Then I done a bootcamp around Salesforce Marketing Cloud that allow me then to have a better understanding. I've done a few trailheads around Marketing Cloud as well that allow me to have then this overview of how is it that things can actually work, and how is it that they connect to each other. Okay. Also, what you can do is do a few also blogs, read articles, whatever that allows you for you to have a high level understanding. But I would go for classes, webinars, or on this specific case, trailheads as well, because I'm talking about Salesforce. Okay, so outside of that, what is it that I do as a second step? Okay, so normally speaking, I go and try to have hands-on. Okay, so that said, I'm gonna go into check on implementation guides, or I do projects, okay, based on what I learned, or also I go into the platform and I try to use it as much as possible. Okay, so essentially, if I do implementation guides, so I read it all across, trying to understand how is it that things connect, then doing a project, try to implement what is it that I learned. Okay, I find it very useful because you have really concrete understanding of what is it that you study, how is it that applies in concrete terms. Okay, so then the other point that I go for is, normally speaking, I just focus on the, let's say, I put it like, let's say, study just enough. Let's put it like that. Okay, so what is it that I mean with this? So normally speaking, I aim for the 80%. Okay, so I take a look into everything that I have in terms of content that you need to study, and you're gonna find different slots or this related to Salesforce. But if it's not Salesforce related, you will understand which of the topics that you need to study are more important for the exam. Okay, with that said, I try to understand what will be then the 80% that I need to study, and I focus on those 80% to make sure that I know everything as much as possible. Okay, so on this concrete example, so I split it out and I try to understand, okay, so from I have, if I do recall correctly, 5 main topics that I need to study, and I came to the conclusion that if I would study 4 of those, I would be already with 80%. Meaning I needed to go over the 67% mark, 0 to 100, of course, and then that was my aim. So I needed to go up to 80%, and that's what I focus my attention on. Okay, then last but not least, that I find also very important, okay, is to have as much as possible a kind of a simulation of the exam in itself. Okay, so for me this is important as well. Why? Because you feel or you try to simulate as much as possible being on the exam, being that doing the same time that you have on a normal exam, go and search for older exams, go into flashcards. But essentially what is important is for you to feel that you are prepping yourself for that specific moment. Okay, with the same time, the 90 minutes or whatever that may be on your concrete example, but study as you'd be already there. Okay, and then when you feel on my specific case, when I feel that I'm over the 80% mark, okay, because I'm getting the results out of the tests, this is when I feel okay, I'm comfortable enough, and I'm gonna go to it, and I'm gonna focus on actually going for the exam. Okay, with that said, I'll be dropping down on the comments below a few of the articles. Okay, what is it that you can study? Some scientific proofs that prove that those initial, let's say, study techniques that I spoke of, as for instance color coding, don't work. Okay, don't waste your time on that, but actually invest your time on techniques that actually do work. Okay, so I'll be dropping that on the comments below. If you want to know a bit more about Salesforce as well, please just click on the link above. You're going to be knowing more about the career around Salesforce, because it's a really an extreme demand career. So if you want to work on marketing, sales, service, on the architecture, as a developer, there is so much that you can do on Salesforce that is crazy. So it's one of the biggest platforms out there in extreme demand, guys. If you want to know more, just check out my LinkedIn, because I'm working for a company that is always and constantly looking for more people. Okay, so feel free to check that out. Okay, with that said, I'm wrapping this up. Please join me on this journey. Give it a thumbs up. Just share your comments, leave your thoughts with regards to this, and subscribe and join me on this journey as I refer. And that's it, guys. Okay, take care. Cheers. Bye.